Also particularly important when you talk about women and children, because women have a larger fat content and we store those fats in more concentrated places just due to our anatomy. So PFAS can be very serious in terms of when it accumulates in the human body, particularly in women and children. So Dr. Smith, again, although she was my PhD student, I always like to mention that my students' research is their research. So Dr. Smith focused on the Lower Tallapoosa watershed, and just a little bit of background of why this matters. The Lower Tallapoosa watershed is a major water quality buffer for the Alabama Coosa-Tallapoosa Basin. This is also the supply for multiple counties' drinking water. So the Tallapoosa River itself is a main water supply for Montgomery County, Alabama County, and Tallapoosa County. This landscape is dominated by, is the little thingy working? No? Okay. This landscape is dominated by agricultural lands, as you can see, but quite a bit of deciduous forest and some grasslands as well, right? So when you say hay and pasture, that's kind of your yellow. That's your cue of agricultural lands, whether it's row crop or it's going to be a hay field. From a geospatial standpoint, that basically shows up as the same, followed by quite a bit of forest as well. You'll also notice that the yellow areas are heavily bordering all the different creeks and tributaries, right? That's not accident. If you want to farm land, you need a water source, and so it makes sense that you will be closest to some of those creeks and tributaries as well. So where are we? Just to give you a little bit of a zoom out of where we are in the southeastern United States. This is the sub-region of the Alabama Coosa subbasin, and then within that you have the Lower Tallapoosa subbasin, right? So it's a pretty large region, but we're right down here. This pink part is what we're talking about. So some of the objectives for this research were really to quantify the presence of PFAS across the surface as well as groundwater in the Lower Tallapoosa subbasin. We really wanted to look at whether or not there was any evidence of PFAS actually in the aquifer. And we'll talk about that possibility a little bit later. And then try to understand what could be some of the sources of that PFAS. So looking at a spatial or a buffer zone around those hot spots that do have PFAS, and also compare it to what we find in our municipal or our public water drinking sources. So initially there was quite a bit of lit review in trying to understand what the local public drinking water sources have as well. But then we move further into actually the field. It was quite a bit of sampling across the Lower Tallapoosa water basin in multiple sites, and also trying to understand again what those potential sites or sources could be for PFAS, right? All right, some results, right? So there are many different types of PFAS. That's why there's a big S on the end, well, a little s technically. But of all the different ones that we tested, we use a national laboratory. The laboratories for testing PFAS, not only are they expensive, but they have to be nationally certified. And there's only about 7 in the nation that can certify a national official result of PFAS. So we have to use a national lab for that. We have about 9 different types of PFAS that actually hit, that were actually detected, right? And you can see quite a bit was found in different locations. And I will try to walk you through what some of these locations are, these different acronyms. MARP1 is referring to Russell Plantation. So Russell Plantation is in the southern part of Macon County, just north of Bullitt County, and that is the Tuskegee University Experimental Forest. So you're looking at sites along there. MA just means Macon County, right? So Macon County CC is on the Coosa, I believe it's called Coosa River. And then you have LT. So that is Tallahassee. All right. So Tallahassee is in our northern neighbor county, and there is a landfill there. So TA is actually Tallahassee landfill. It's a known site of potential environmental violations as well, which is a whole nother presentation. And the work that we're doing to help the Tallahassee community actually fight some of those injustices there. And then we have Tallahassee wells. Now, these wells are actually on private land. They're not currently in use. They were in use up to about 5 years ago. But due to the landfill activity and what has been found from previous researchers, those individuals were switched to city water, right? One of the more striking situations we have where just 5 years ago they were on the well water as their primary source. It's this last Tallahassee W2 or TALW2 well. And there's a family there, very interesting, nice family, but you can see they were positive for almost every type of PFAS that we detected, which is pretty shocking. And they raise cattle, they have a garden. And so you can imagine for not a commercial farmer, but a more of a subsistence local market farmer, what are the long-term implications of having a garden on those same lands and using some of that water that is from that lower aquifer, right? When you build a cattle pond for water, that's surface water or that's well water is coming from deeper down. So those contaminants are accumulating in higher trophic. I talked about higher trophic level accumulation within not only their vegetable gardens, but vegetables from their garden, but also that cattle. So more research definitely needs to happen related to that trophic accumulation. The other thing I want to point out before we move on is this maximum contaminant level set by EPA. So this is the recommended maximum contaminant level before you reach health concerns. As you can see, it is 1.0 or less than or none at all. And you can see that every single contaminant is seized at monumentally. So it's a very serious situation that's happening in Tallahassee. Another interesting point is I want you to notice that when we go back to Russell Plantation, again, this is about 20 miles downhill or downslope of the Tallahassee landfill. You can see those contaminants are able to be picked up in surface water as far as 20 miles away, right? And in between those 2 points, which I will show you momentarily, is the intake for Macon County Public Water Municipality, right? So the next thing we want to do is just compare surface water, right, to drinking water. Is there any evidence that there's PFAS showing up existing in the drinking water of any of these municipalities that have intake valves within this distance between the landfill, basically, and our lower sample areas at the Russell Experimental Forest? And so there are a lot of public sources you can use. The Environmental Work Group Tap Water Database is just a free online database. And the data they have is just accumulative from the published public databases, right? So it could be your utilities board or Auburn Water Works, it doesn't matter. But they gather all that information together that's published monthly, and they just put it in a simply used platform. Right? So when you think about what was detected from public water, we found it to correspond the exact same. So even in our public drinking water, it's the exact same locations. Not all the PFAS popped up, but most of it did. Also interesting on this particular map is, again, I want you to note that distance travel of surface contaminants. And this is just what one lab is actually detecting, right? This is not an entire EPA team. This is not the special forces of like environmental justice. This is just one lab with sufficient amount of funds to do a significant amount of PFAS testing. And it's about $500 a sample. So it's very expensive. This is not something that most communities can afford. But this is that lower Tallahassee area here, which is right outside of Macon County, right? And the samples from lower down in Russell Plantation are what you see along here, okay? That's a Euphaubi Creek, so it's actually a tributary of the Tallapoosa River that we're still finding those high level contaminants. Again, all surface water that corresponds also with the well water samples and also the drinking water samples. So what does this mean? We don't really know. So when you think about any type of new contaminant in an environment or ecosystem that has the potential, particularly those that behave in the way that a hormone would behave, you expect a lot of nutrient alteration and a lot of chemical disruption. There's been research that PFAS is worse than DDT. Back in the 70s and 80s, in terms of what it can do to your more sensitive species, particularly amphibians, not just in simply stressing them, but actually changing the chemicals in their body and the way they function, disrupting reproductive processes. Again, we don't have all the information and data in terms of bioaccumulation when it comes to fish, not just simply for the purpose of consumption, but also, again, our natural species that are not game fishery species, or how that affects our agricultural crops. What does it mean for corn that's grown in these environments? Or is there an accumulation of these type of chemicals in the corn that's growing there that's then fed to the cows? And how does it move up in the process? We also don't understand fully the level in which it may affect the decline of certain aquatic and terrestrial species and the long-term implications of this buildup within the ecosystems. Ecosystems traditionally are extremely resilient and they somehow find a way, particularly wetlands, but more work is needed to be done. And particularly in advocating for these communities that are socially, economically disenfranchised, who not only may not understand the policy that goes into place that allows them to be vulnerable in these spaces, but also they may have difficulty understanding the science. So we need young people and universities to spend quite a bit of time in the education range so that we can facilitate communities being self-advocates and understand how their water is affecting them so they can advocate for themselves and demand better policy response. So just some conclusions here. Out of the 9 sample locations, 6 detected PFAS. We're not presenting heavy metal data here, but heavy metal analysis was also done. I will mention that titanium and chromium were both there, including a radioactive chromium was found in the water, public water source, and also the well water. And there are some pretty urgent needs in terms of monitoring, particularly in this area. We have continued this work. I mentioned the trophic accumulation and monitoring before. So that's where our lab is now on this particular aspect, is trying to have tissue samples from fish, both whole fish and also fillet, what people typically consume, to understand if the trophic accumulation is happening and what would be the appropriate mitigation in terms of public awareness as related to those findings. These are some lovely acknowledgments. Hey, there's me. Again, this work was done, I would like to acknowledge, Dr. Brianna Smith. This work was conducted by her. I just supervise or mentor, whatever you want to call it. Um, Mr. Ron Smith is our forester, and there have been countless other folks that participate in this. Funding Southern Research Station of U.S. Forest Service is very important for this project, as well as from the department and the College of Ag. Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions?